Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Ethan Cole never expected his marriage to collapse on a random Tuesday night in their neat suburban living room. He and his wife, Madison, had been married for nearly 8 years. Their lives were built on habits. Morning coffees brewed strong and black, Sunday grocery runs, late-night Netflix marathons where Madison usually fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. To anyone looking from the outside, they had what people called a solid marriage. But inside, small cracks had begun to form. Cracks Ethan dismissed as ordinary stress. Madison had grown more distant, her laughter less frequent, her eyes wandering off to her phone in the middle of conversations. Ethan, being a loyal and deeply invested husband, thought all marriages went through quiet seasons. He believed that if he worked harder, planned a surprise trip, maybe reignited their intimacy, everything would snap back into place. That illusion shattered the moment Madison put her phone down, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I think we should open our relationship." At first, Ethan thought she was joking. He laughed nervously, waiting for her to smirk. But her eyes didn't soften. They stayed steady, unreadable, like she had rehearsed this line for weeks. His chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Madison exhaled slowly. "I still love you, but I don't think monogamy works anymore. I just feel like we're stuck. This could be something new, something exciting." Her words landed like a blade. Something new, exciting. She was talking about their marriage like it was a piece of furniture she wanted to replace. Ethan asked the question every betrayed husband asks, the one that burns your throat as it comes out. "Is there someone else?" She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No, it's not like that." But Ethan knew. He could see it in her measured tone, the way her hands fiddled with her sweater. Maybe she hadn't crossed the line physically yet, but emotionally, she was already gone. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at her. This was the woman he had carried through storms, the woman he trusted with his future. And now she was asking him to surrender it all. He should have stood up, should have said absolutely not, should have walked away. But fear is a powerful silencer. Fear of losing her, fear of being replaced, fear that maybe he wasn't enough anymore. So against every instinct in his body, Ethan forced a smile and whispered, "Okay." The moment the word left his lips, he knew he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. From that night, their marriage no longer belonged to both of them. It belonged to her. Madison beamed, relieved. She grabbed his hand. "I really think this will be good for us." Good for us. Ethan wanted to scream. How could betrayal disguised as freedom be good for anyone? But he swallowed the words. He had already surrendered. The days after Madison's proposal blurred into a strange new rhythm, though nothing about it felt like marriage anymore. Ethan still woke at 6 every morning, made coffee, and ironed his shirt before work, but even the smallest actions felt hollow. Madison, once the woman who would kiss him before he left for the office, now lingered in bed scrolling on her phone, her face glowing with a secret kind of energy. Ethan noticed everything. The half-smile she gave to texts he couldn't see, the way she dressed with more care, choosing skirts that hugged her figure, brushing her hair longer than usual, applying lipstick even for errands. These weren't things she did for him anymore. He said nothing, not because he didn't care, but because he was collecting every detail, storing each moment of betrayal like kindling for a fire he wasn't ready to light. One Friday evening, as Ethan was chopping vegetables for dinner, Madison appeared in the doorway, clutching her phone. "I'm going out tonight," she said, voice casual, as if she were announcing a grocery run. Ethan's hand paused over the cutting board. "With who?" She hesitated for the faintest second before answering. "Just someone from the app. His name's Ryan. He seems nice." The knife hit the board harder than he intended. Madison flinched, then quickly added, "You said this was okay, remember? We agreed on honesty." Honesty. Ethan nearly laughed. She had taken their marriage, twisted it into something unrecognizable, and now she was patting herself on the back for being honest. He forced a smile. "Yeah, right. Honesty." That night, Madison dressed like she hadn't in years. Black heels, red dress, perfume he hadn't smelled since their honeymoon. She gave him a polite kiss on the cheek and whispered, "Don't wait up." The door closed. Ethan stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of garlic and onions, staring at the spot she'd just vacated. For the first time in 8 years, he felt like a ghost in his own home. The hours crawled. He poured himself whiskey, sat on the couch, and stared at the dark television screen. Every creak of the house mocked him. Images tormented his mind. Madison laughing with Ryan, leaning across a restaurant table, maybe brushing his hand, maybe more. By the time she returned, well past midnight, Ethan was still awake. Madison slipped off her heels and sank into the couch with a sigh. Her hair was messy, her lipstick smudged, her eyes glowing with something he hadn't seen directed at him in years. "How was it?" he asked quietly. She looked startled by the question. "It was different." Different. That single word cut deeper than any confession. Ethan nodded, pretending not to care. But inside, something dark began to crystallize. In the weeks that followed, Madison's outings grew frequent. She came home later, laughed at jokes on her phone Ethan never heard, and smelled of cologne that wasn't his. Their shared dinners became silent affairs. Their bed, a battlefield of distance. Ethan adapted. He rose earlier, stayed at the office longer, hit the gym with a fury that left his muscles aching. On the surface, he looked like a man coping. Inside, he was constructing a plan. Every betrayal Madison inflicted only sharpened his resolve. She thought he was weak, too afraid to leave, too desperate to keep her. She believed she held all the power. And Ethan let her think that. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. Madison had promised to spend the day with him, to reconnect. Ethan had actually believed her. He planned a quiet morning, made pancakes, set the table. By 10 a.m., her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face lighting up with a smile that wasn't meant for him. "I'll be back later," she said, grabbing her purse. Ethan's jaw clenched. "We had plans." She barely looked at him. Something came up. Rain check. Rain check. As if their marriage were an appointment she could casually reschedule. When the door closed behind her, Ethan stared at the untouched pancakes, syrup pooling uselessly on the table. That was the moment his anger solidified into something sharper. Not grief. Not fear. Revenge. He started small. He stopped asking where she went. Stopped waiting up. When Madison returned, flushed from her dates, she found him calm, composed, almost indifferent. That unsettled her more than any argument could have. Then Ethan made changes, subtle ones. He upgraded his wardrobe, traded old shirts for tailored suits. He reconnected with colleagues and old friends, men and women who reminded him of who he used to be before Madison drained him dry. He began attending business dinners, sometimes not coming home until late. Madison noticed. "You've been out a lot," she remarked one night, trying to sound casual. Ethan smirked. "We agreed, didn't we? Freedom. Exploration. I'm just living by your rules." Her face faltered. She tried to mask it, but he saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. For the first time since this began, Madison realized she was no longer in control. Ethan's routine sharpened into something deliberate. In the mornings, he was affectionate but distant, kissing her forehead like she was an acquaintance. At night, he stayed glued to his phone, texting people she didn't know. And then came the night that turned the tables completely. Ethan dressed sharply in a crisp navy suit, cologne subtle but commanding. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror, Madison stood in the doorway, arms folded. "Where are you going?" she asked. Ethan's smile was slow, deliberate. "Dinner." "With who?" He met her gaze. "Does it matter?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she felt what he had endured, the helpless, gnawing dread of being replaced. That night, as Ethan walked out the door, Madison sat on the couch, staring at the silence around her. For the first time, she tasted the poison she had forced him to swallow. And Ethan? He felt nothing but satisfaction. Because this was no longer about survival. It was about teaching her that every choice has a cost, and hers was about to come due. Ethan's revenge didn't begin with fire and fury. It started with silence, composure, and an unsettling calmness that Madison couldn't ignore. He had learned early that rage gave her power. If he exploded, she could play the victim. But silence, indifference, that stripped her of control. Madison had always expected Ethan to chase her, to beg, to plead for her attention. She thought she could toy with the boundaries of their marriage and still have him waiting in the wings. But when he walked out that night in his navy suit, saying simply, "Does it matter?" her stomach twisted with something she hadn't felt in months, fear. She waited up, pacing the living room, her hands trembling as she checked the clock. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. When Ethan finally returned, he didn't creep in apologetically. He strolled in confidently, loosening his tie, his cologne heavy in the air. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice cracking. Ethan glanced at her, smirking faintly. "Out." Her throat tightened. "With who?" He shrugged. "With someone who still knows how to value loyalty." The words hit her like a slap. She froze, realizing the tables had turned. From that moment, Madison's brightness dimmed. The excitement she once carried from her so-called freedom began to collapse under the weight of jealousy and regret. The irony was cruel. She had wanted Ethan to agree to openness, but she never imagined she'd be the one left behind in her own game. Days later, Ethan caught her watching him. She lingered in doorways, eyes scanning his phone, waiting for him to volunteer details. He never did. At breakfast one morning, she finally broke. "Ethan, are you seeing someone?" He sipped his coffee, eyes locked on hers, and answered coolly, "Would it matter if I was?" Her face crumbled. "Of course it matters. You're my husband." His laugh was short, bitter. You remembered that now. The guilt that had once seemed so far from Madison's mind began to eat at her. She had thought her new freedom would make her feel alive, but instead, she felt used, discarded. The men she met saw her as an option, not a choice. None of them looked at her the way Ethan once did. And now, even he didn't look at her like that anymore. One evening, she returned home early and found Ethan standing in front of the mirror, buttoning his shirt. He looked different, stronger, sharper, more alive. "Where are you going tonight?" she asked quietly. He adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. "Out." She bit her lip. "Ethan, can we not do this? Can we stop? Please. I don't want this anymore." He turned then, his eyes cold but steady. "You don't get to decide that now. You wanted this. You asked for this. You opened the door." Her voice trembled. "I made a mistake." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes, you did." For weeks, the tension simmered. Madison tried to backpedal, tried to reignite what she had destroyed. She cooked his favorite meals, left sweet notes on the counter, even reached for his hand during their evening walks. But Ethan wasn't fooled. One night, when she tried to initiate intimacy, he pulled back. "Don't," he said flatly. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Not like I used to." The real revenge wasn't in Ethan sleeping with someone else. It was in showing Madison exactly what it felt like to be insignificant. He let her sit in silence while he got ready for nights out. He let her wait up while he returned home late, never offering explanations. He let her drown in the very emptiness she had forced on him. And then came the moment that sealed everything. Ethan had met someone, a woman named Claire, a colleague from his firm. She was kind, intelligent, and had a warmth that reminded him what genuine connection felt like. Unlike Madison, Claire wasn't restless or selfish. She listened, laughed freely, and treated Ethan like he mattered. The first time Madison saw Claire was accidental. Ethan had left his phone on the counter, and a message popped up. "Had a great time last night. Let's do it again soon." "See." Madison's face went pale. She clutched the phone in her hand, staring at the screen as though it were a weapon aimed at her. When Ethan walked in and saw her holding it, he didn't flinch. "You went through my phone?" he asked calmly. Her voice cracked. "Who is she?" Ethan smirked faintly. "Does it matter?" The same words he had said before, but this time, they shattered her. That night, Madison broke down. She sobbed at the kitchen table, begging him to talk, to listen, to give her another chance. "I don't want anyone else, Ethan. I just want you. I was wrong. I ruined everything." Ethan watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. "You wanted freedom. You wanted choices. Now you're living with them." She reached for his hand desperately. "I don't want freedom. I want us. Please, let's fix this." He pulled his hand away. "You can't fix something you burned to the ground." The following weeks turned into a cruel mirror of their past. Madison grew paranoid, insecure, and restless, the very emotion she had once inflicted on Ethan. She asked where he was going, who he was texting, when he'd be back. Ethan, meanwhile, grew stronger. He poured himself into work, into fitness, into Claire. He no longer needed Madison's approval, her love, or even her presence. The man she thought would never leave had already left emotionally. One evening, Madison tried again. She cornered him in the living room, her voice trembling with desperation. "Ethan, I love you. I don't want to lose you." He looked at her, his face calm but detached. "You already did." Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch, sobbing. Ethan stood over her for a long moment before walking away, leaving her in the ruins of what she had built. The ultimate revenge wasn't loud, wasn't violent, wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was simple. Ethan had become untouchable. He had taken back the power she stole from him. And by the time Madison realized what she had lost, he was already too far gone. For her, it was the beginning of endless regret. For him, it was the beginning of freedom. The night Ethan finally ended, it was quiet, deliberate, and free of theatrics. Madison had spent the entire day in a haze, her eyes swollen from crying, her movements frantic as she tried one last time to resurrect a version of their marriage that no longer existed. She cooked his favorite dinner, set candles on the table, even wore the dress he once loved. Ethan walked in late. He paused in the doorway, surveying the scene. Madison's hopeful eyes met his, but instead of softening, his expression stayed steady, detached. He sat down, picked at the food politely, then put his fork down after a few bites. "Madison," he said, his voice calm but unshakable, "we need to talk." Her hands trembled as she gripped her wine glass. "Please don't say it," she whispered. But he did. "We're done." The glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. Her lips quivered. No, you can't just... Ethan, we can work through this. I'll stop everything. I'll do whatever it takes. I was wrong." He leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. "That's the thing. You were wrong from the moment you asked me to open the door. You broke what we had. And even if we stopped now, even if you swore it was over, that version of us is gone." Tears streamed down her face as she scrambled around the broken glass. "I can change. Please, don't throw us away." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You already did." That night, he packed his bags. Madison followed him room to room, begging, pleading, grasping at his arm like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. "Don't leave me, Ethan. I can't live without you," she cried. He turned to her at the doorway, his eyes cold but not cruel. "You should have thought of that before you chose everyone else over me." She froze, her breath hitching in her throat. Ethan opened the door, stepped into the night, and never looked back. The weeks that followed were brutal for Madison. She called, texted, left voicemails. She even showed up outside his new apartment, begging him to just talk. But Ethan had already detached. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply gave her silence, the one punishment she could never undo. Her social media presence shifted from curated smiles to haunting quiet. Friends told Ethan she looked hollow, like someone who had lost everything and only just realized it. And in a way, she had. 6 months later, Ethan was different, stronger, happier. He had poured himself into the gym, his work, and yes, into Claire, a woman who didn't make him question his worth, who didn't treat his love like a placeholder. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen. Then, fate twisted its knife one last time. At a mutual friend's gathering, Ethan and Madison crossed paths. She looked fragile, her smile thin, her eyes darting nervously when they landed on him. She took a breath, stepped closer, and whispered, "Hi." Ethan gave her a polite nod, offered a faint smile, and then walked past her without another word. It wasn't anger. It wasn't cruelty. It was the purest form of revenge, indifference. As Madison stood there frozen, realization dawned. She had gambled with their marriage, convinced he would always be waiting. But he wasn't. She had lost him for good. And Ethan, he didn't just survive her betrayal. He grew stronger because of it. He stepped into a life where he was no longer begging to be chosen. The final irony was simple. Madison wanted freedom, but she never understood that freedom comes with loss. Ethan had given her exactly what she asked for, until she realized too late that what she truly wanted was the one thing she could never have back.